today we're going to be doing my wrap up for January and February. I've done 3 takes of this intro. Not having a good day. I finally am over COVID, but now allergies are ramping up, so I have not had a break from sneezing in like an entire month. That aside, we're going to talk about some of the books that I read in the first 2 months of this year, and I will just preface this by saying it was a very mixed bag. I didn't read a ton because of being sick, but also because school, and I don't know, I've been in a slump. I don't really have a big reason for it other than I just haven't been reading. So, hi dog. Do you have to be involved? So I have my notes on my phone here, so that's what I'm going to be looking at. If you see me glancing down, that is what's going on. Okay, so to start off in January, the very first book I read of this year was The War of Two Queens by Jennifer Armentrout. I just wanted to give you my overall rating to start with, and that was a 3 out of 5. This book was very mid. Very mid. Okay, looking back on it, I could even rate it like a 2.5. I did not enjoy most of my time reading this book, if I'm being real with you. So, some thoughts and feelings. So I'm trying to get better at my wrap-ups, and as you can see, I have some notes this time instead of just going into it blind. Anyways, my thoughts and feelings about The War of Two Queens. Wow, this was not worth the hype when it came out. Okay, so overall, I felt like this was a slog. Not a lot happens. It's 600 plus pages, takes place over the span of like 40 days, and it's super boring. The spice element and the romance is just very tame in this series overall, in my opinion. And I think that's a little over-exaggerated. Poppy in this one is exhausting. And even though I like some of the other side characters, I, for example, do like Cass, and I do like Kieran and Reaver. In this one, but it didn't really make up for what it feels like it's lacking. Kieran and Reaver were the best parts of this book, in my opinion, especially Reaver. He fucking cracks me up. Why is he always naked? I love it. It's just chaotic. I know people freaked out when this came out because of the threesome, and in my opinion, it's not worth reading 600 pages of boring to get to it. It was very tame. It was not worth it, and it felt very much like fan service, which is what other people were saying. So, yeah, overall, 3 out of 5. I am considering DNFing the series as a whole. I have the next book, and I have the first book in the prequel series, so I'm thinking of giving the prequel series a shot, see how I feel, but I think overall, this series at this point is just not for me. The books are so obnoxiously long. I don't like Poppy very much, like how she acts. She kind of reminds me of someone we're going to get to later a little bit. So, I don't know, doesn't feel like an adult novel to me. The sex scenes and everything are very incredibly tame. I started out the year very strong, as you can see. Sarcasm. So the next book that I read in January was The Hurricane Wars. And I did enjoy this one. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So I didn't feel quite as bad. Like, I could have given this a 4. I just didn't feel like it was quite 4 material. If you're not familiar personally with my rating out of 1 of 5, 4 seems to be the thing I give the most. And usually those are books are like, I liked them. I greatly liked them. But they weren't like some of the best books I've ever read. So, that being said, I have to be like entertained throughout the entirety of the book and be addicted to the book to give it to a 5. To give it a 4 is pretty standard for me. This was a good time and I liked it. So 3.5, I had some qualms with this book, but it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. So I've heard mixed things online. I knew that going into it that I might be disappointed. I did not know until I started reading this that this was another Rilo fanfic, so I haven't even watched the new Star Wars. I just don't, maybe that's why it doesn't bother me as much. Just some thoughts and feelings about it. This one did feel like it read like YA fantasy, like just the tone of the writing. The voice and tone of the book being like YA, kind of on the younger side, did throw me off at first, and mostly because I was expecting an adult novel. I didn't hate the romance or the characters as much as other people did. A lot of other people really hated the characters or really hated the like transition from the focus on the war and the main character to being like the romance. That didn't bother me as much as it bothered other people. Honestly, once the romance got going, I was pretty hooked. And I felt like it was very, very slow burn. It's kind of enemies to kind of lovers, not really, but kinda. By the end of the first book, and it didn't bother me. It bothered some people that there wasn't a lot of movement in the relationship, but I do think this series has a lot of potential for me, so I am going to pick up the next one. I did like this overall. A lot of good things to say about this. There was just some things, like the pacing, kind of, mid. And some of the side characters that were a huge focus at the first half of the book are not a focus at the second half, which was kind of weird, but I think that's going to come back around, so I am excited to read the next installment in this series. So the next book that I read was actually a non-fiction, and this was The Dark Archives. This is a librarian's investigation into the science and history of books bound in human skin. I've had this book for a couple years now. I got it for Christmas a couple years ago, I think 2 years ago, and I finally read it. And I did enjoy it. It was a 4 out of 5 for me. I was so surprised that this book was about so much more than just books bound in human skin. The author makes a lot of really interesting connections between, like, the books bound in human skin and the other aspects that maybe contributed to that being a phenomena, such as the impact overall of clinical gaze and dehumanization, especially in women, incarcerated people, and people of color. Yeah, so I found the writing style of this like really enjoyable, really digestible. It was almost like memoir-like. Overall, really enjoyed it. Not a lot to say. It's a rather short book, very informative, very interesting to learn about as a librarian. So yeah, overall found this really good. It was not as gruesome as I thought it was going to be. I don't know why I thought this was going to be really like gory and detailed and stuff, but it's not. It's not. If you're worried about that, this book is really interesting. If you'd like to read it and you're worried about it being really hard to read, like really gory and stuff, it's not. So, all right. So also in January, I did pick up Ruthless Vows. I rated it a 2 out of 5. I did DNF this book at about 60%. If you're not familiar, my rule of thumb is if I read more than half the book, so 50% or more, I do rate it. And I did, typically if I'm considering DNFing, I will go read other reviews that are like 1 and 2 star reviews, see if they're feeling the same way I am, kind of get some biased validation there, and then I'll decide to DNF. Once I decide to DNF, if I'm really interested in how it might end, or like, should I really, take the time to slog through this and finish it, even though I want to DNF it, I will spoil myself for the ending. It's just a personal thing that I do, just kind of see if the ending's going to be worth it. Because for me, just reading like a broad synopsis of how the ending goes doesn't really spoil the experience for me a lot of the time. It'll give me some idea of, is this going to pay off for me without me emotionally experiencing the ending, if that makes sense. So I won't like emotionally spoil it for myself. I know not everybody's like that. That's how I am. So just some insight there. So I did DNF Ruthless Vows at 60%. I do know how it ends. I spoiled myself, like I was saying. So let me just say that I adored the first book. All right? This felt like all the magic and chemistry of the first book just evaporated. And only the depressing aspects were left behind. So the main characters spend about 2% of the book together. When they do, it's somehow really awkward and cringy to read. There's mostly a focus on the war aspects and the gods. I did see someone, either it was on a TikTok or on Goodreads, saying that Dakar, or I say Dakra, but I've seen people pronounce it Dakar, the one god, the quote-unquote bad god, felt like the main character, and I think that's hilarious, but also super true, because he did low-key feel like the main character in this book, and it was kind of annoying. The ending really started to feel like it was just going to swoop in and be rushed and predictable, which from what I read, it was. Overall, this actually made my reading slump worse. It was one of the most disappointing sequel reads I have ever experienced. I'm sad about it, but it is what it is. I think it should also be noted that I do hate Forrest, the main character's brother. I don't like him. I don't understand why people like him. I know our main character cares greatly about him, but like, he literally kidnapped her. He is the whole fucking reason that the shit in book 2 exists. He's the whole fucking reason. So, yeah. I was annoyed at the end of the first book. But yeah, I just don't, I couldn't forgive him. I didn't like how it was brushed under the rug. That's probably my main pet peeve. And then to find out at the end what happens with Forrest, I just don't feel bad. I don't feel bad. And because of that, I was like, oh, this ending doesn't even matter to me. So that's how I felt about that. I was very disappointed by the sequel. And yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. It was a 2 out of 5 for me. Wasn't fucking happy about it. And then lastly, in January, I did read Heartstopper number 5. I give this a 4 out of 5. I think we're getting one more, and then that's the last installment. I really liked in this one how the author worked out the conflict between Charlie and his mom. I think it was really sweet. It showed a realistic example of conflict and resolution and kind of understanding between an adult and a teenager while still maintaining boundaries. I thought it was realistic. And it was good. It was like a healthy example of that. Instead of like big blowout fights, which is, Lord knows, that's all I knew. So, I also really appreciate how this series not only shows the very real struggles of like LGBTQIA teens, but it also shows like the struggles of adults and parents of those teens and how they're navigating that. I thought that was really nice. So as expected, I love this volume just as much as the others. I am going to read the last one, and yeah, it's good. Read it if you haven't. I haven't watched the show yet, so there's that. Okay, so in February, I read just a few books. A mix of being sick, trying to keep up with school, you know, trying to stay alive. Staying alive over here. So I think I have 2 books. Yeah, just 2 books to talk about. One was really good and one was very bad. So So let's just talk about the good one first. Okay, let's start there because we're gonna finish on a bang here. Okay, so I read The Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco, and this is the first book I have read by her. And I really want to read her other books now because she is a phenomenal author, in my opinion. So this is her, I think it's her debut into adult. So she kind of went YA, new adult. Okay, and there's like previous, the Kingdom of the Wicked series, the 3 books in that take place in the same universe as this. You do not need to read this. You do not need to read those first. You will fully understand what is happening. But now I want to read that series because I love these characters. So I give this a 5 out of 5. If you can't tell, I'm really hyped to read the next book. I think it's only a 2-book series, technically. I'm not sure if she's going to add more, but like, man, I loved this. This was so good. This is a new favorite series for me. I'm like real big into mythology, but like also like the embodiment of the 7 deadly sins thing is chef's kiss. It is amazing. So yeah, I'm super hyped for the next book. The romance in this is very good. The spice, like maybe a 3.5. I mean, depends on where you fall personally on the scale, but like it's pretty good. The romance is great. The chemistry between the characters is amazing. Envy is hot in like a sad way. And Camilla is one of the best female leads I have ever had the pleasure of reading because she's not some like simpering damsel in distress or like doubts herself and her powers and her abilities. She like matches him toe to toe and it is great. It's great. They are a perfect match, I will just say. Like, on top of that, the plot is really strong. It's fast paced. Writing is top quality. Side cast, even, of characters is great. There wasn't a damn thing about this book that I disliked. So, yeah, great book. If you haven't read it, please read it. So, I know it's received a little bit of interest on the internet, but like, damn, this is good. So, please read this one. I want people to read it and experience it and love it. And I can't wait for the next one. And I'm going to read all of her backlist now. I don't know about the stalking Jack the Ripper series. Historical fiction is not really my thing. So, I'll read a little historical romance here and there, but anyways, let's get into the book that was very bad in February. And I know you're probably guessing what it is. And you're probably right. It was House of Flame and Shadow by Miss Sarah Janet Maas. If I could give this... Oh my god, I feel so bad. I don't want to be fucking mean, but there's plenty of people that are really mean. And as you can see behind me, I do like... Especially Throne of Glass. I know a lot of people don't like Throne of Glass, but I do. I enjoyed it. It was just a fun time. ACOTAR is okay, it's mid for me. But I do, whatever. I've enjoyed her books in the past, right? She's not the most prolific author in the world, definitely. But her books can be entertaining, okay? I have a lot to say about House of Flame and Shadow. So I technically rated it a 1 out of 5. If I could give it 0, I probably would. This is probably not only the most disappointing Sarah J. Maas release I've ever read, but it's also probably in the top 5 of worst books I've ever read. And that's saying a lot. Because I'm definitely not a blanket overall 110% of the time Sarah J. Maas hater, as I have said. But I did DNF this at 62%. The 60s seem to be where I'm DNFing things because, oh boy. And I did spoil myself for the ending, and I can't really say I give a shit that I missed out on it. So, just overall, I want to just start off with there's something about this series that just doesn't hit for me quite like the others, and it's not a good thing. I'm not quite sure how this book is so fucking long and so little happens. So, to be fair, things do happen. I just don't really care about any of them. And I've seen other people say this. I don't think it's a me thing. It could be partially a me thing because I don't like Bryce. There are a few characters in this series that I care about a ton or connect with a ton. So that being said, I just didn't really give a shit a lot about the stuff happening in this one. The first book in the series, I have heard other people say it's the best one. I agree. So things do happen. I just didn't really care about them. To start off, I could not stand Bryce. I have a note here that says she acts like a 14-year-old boy from Gen Alpha, and it's weird. So that's how I feel about that. She would walk into a room and go, "Oh yeah," or do the weird mewing thing, or just anything. Use bruh unironically. She, for as much as being alpha hole this, alpha hole that, she is one of them. She's just like them. She's just female. It's annoying. So yeah, that whole swagger thing, I'm looking at you, Aylin, specifically, that Sarah J. Maas tends to write into her characters, it doesn't work for Bryce. It comes off as very weird, cringy, annoying, and immature. It's just, I don't know, something about her character. It just doesn't work for me. I felt this way since the beginning. It only got worse in this book. When I was annotating this, I had an entire tab for Bryce is fucking annoying. So, on top of all of that being very annoying, she makes really stupid choices repeatedly and then has to clean up her own mess and never learns from her mistakes. And I don't care what anyone says about the timeline of this book. A lot of people are like, well, it only takes place over 10 days. Why is it 900 pages long then? Why is it so fucking long? If it takes place over 10 days and there were Kingdom of Ash is like, what, a week? And we see a lot of character growth there. So that's not an excuse. So I did like the parts where she was like in Akatar world. I do like Nesta, but I feel like, and this is what other people have said as well, that the characters in that portion were stripped of all their character growth and all of what makes them them, and they became two-dimensional side characters secondary to Bryce. And that has to be the most annoying portion of the book when it comes to Bryce. I also didn't really understand the fight, quote unquote, between Hunt and Bryce. Mostly it was just Bryce being a huge to Hunt. Wow, that rhymes. Anyways, it was her being a huge asshole to Hunt, and it didn't make sense to me. It just felt like both of them refusing to communicate and be honest and forthcoming, and it was stupid, and I felt a little bad for Hunt. So overall, I don't understand why Bryce makes the choices she makes or behaves the way she behaves. She demonstrates an overall lack of character growth, and in fact, like, I think regresses in this last book. Through the end of the book, she continues to be selfish and arrogant and short-sighted constantly. So literally every other character demonstrates some degree of character growth in this book, except for Bryce. And that's wild, because she's the main character, isn't she? That's all I have to say about that. I will not be continuing this series, in case you couldn't tell, and I am unhauling this series as soon as I can erase my annotations from my book. So, I think it may be just time to move on from Sarah J. Maas for me, and just enjoy the past series for what they were, and I think at this point it's pretty obviously we're sacrificing quality and stuff for money grabs. I mean, this felt like it was written by AI in a bad way, or she didn't give a shit about these characters or the story. It felt messy, it was disappointing, it was angering as someone who generally does like her books, and disappointed, and that's all I have to say about that. 1 to 0 stars out of 5. It was a bad time. Don't want to do it again. Will not do it again. Anyways, so those are all the books I read in January and February. February is not quite over. I am halfway through Icebreaker by Hannah Grace, but I'm going to wrap that one up in my next one. I am doing these bi-monthly now, so the next one will be it may be the end of April or the beginning of May. So it's going to be for March and April. Okay, so I'm not doing these every month, mostly so I can fit other videos in where I want to fit them in. And I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe. I need subscribers. More than liking, I would rather you subscribe to my channel and stick around and have conversations. So, as always, I hope you have a good rest of your week. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.